Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM, and this is a show where we hang out, we talk about games, gaming, uh, things that we love, things that inspire us, things that bring joy to us, things that are beautiful. And it may be weird to talk about beauty with what we're talking about today, but I am a huge fan, as most of you know, of horror RPGs. And so I am excited to talk about this game. The game we're going to talk about today is a game called Myrrorside, a game by Parallel Publishing, created by Angus McNichol. And it is a game. It says, "The world beyond the looking glass is not the one that Alice described. There are things there, things that are mockeries of us, twisted, hungry things. What if I told you that it wasn't you looking back from the other side of that silver pane? It's them, watching, waiting." And so this game had me pretty early on, because when you flip through it, when it says, here's the things that we take inspiration from: 28 Days Later, Carrie, Darkwater, Dog Soldiers, Event Horizon, Fallen, It, Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street, Cabin in the Woods, The Shining, The Prophecy, among others. These are games that these are movies that I love. Good morning to John Doom. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Are you going to make the Peg Pizza Party? And to Tink and to Padre and to all of those of you who are hanging out and watching, I'm really excited to be sharing this game for you. It's a small little indie game. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes when it goes live on YouTube. You can get it on Drive-Thru RPG. This is the cover of this game, Myrrorside. It's got some, it's speaking to me. This is the my hatred of clowns from watching It all those years ago. And very early on, the game asks you to firewalk with him, which, if you are a fan of, my brain just died, Twin Peaks, there we go. It is firewalk with me is a very specific and very highly charged term, so I was very intrigued. So this is a game about traveling between two realms, one of science and logic, one of magic and horror. And when things cross over, that is where things get interesting. So essentially, if you have played a White Wolf game, there's a lot of the umbra of stepping sideways to this, but essentially magic comes from the other side, the mirror side. It's also where horrors and monsters and denizens come from. We come from the science side, and magic doesn't work so well in our world anymore like it used to, and science doesn't really work well on their side. Rook, good to see you, buddy. And so this is a game where you're talking about this liminal space and people who can traverse the liminal space and step from one side to the other. The horrors that arise from that, the terror, the exploration, the investigation, the things about horror role-playing games kind of at their finest. And so as we kind of talk about this game, I want to give you an overview of how to play it. There's a lot that I love about it. You guys are going to see why, because it reminds me a lot of Savage Worlds. And it runs off a game called the 2DX OS is what they're calling it, the 2-die operating system. So essentially, you're going to be playing investigators, humans, people kind of caught up in a mystery and the horror as it unfolds of encounters with the mirror side. Now, when you get into the GM section, they really stress a very American Horror Story, Buffy the Vampire Slayer style game where each session is essentially an episode, and each episode builds towards a seasonal climax. And then you have your denouncement, and then you start the next season with a new set of enemies and a new overarching plot. For some people, they're going to love that. I actually like that a lot when I'm playing a horror game. For others, if you want a little bit more sandbox, if you want a little bit more exploration, there's still ways to do that. Fringe, the role-playing game, a little bit. A little bit more supernatural than that, although there are technological ways of breaching to the mirror side. So essentially, you have four attributes: your physical, your mental, your social, and your attunement, which kind of handles your magic. Attributes and skills are rated on a uh, a step system going from D2, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, which, if you think about it, is essentially sort of the Savage Worlds step up. You only need a 0 to succeed, though, instead of a 4. But that's because a normal task, if you will, is -4 to the die roll. You roll 2 dice, one from your attribute, one from your skill. So you're going to be rolling 2 different pairs of dice sometimes. And you apply the modifier, and as long as you get a 0 or higher, you succeed. Now, you'll also sometimes have advantage and disadvantage, where you roll extra dice, taking the highest or the lowest of your totals, and they can stack. So you can have things that give you advantage and things that give you disadvantage. And so you're rolling a large number of dice, and you remove a number of your highest dice equal to your disadvantage and a number of your lowest dice equal to your advantage, and you're always left with your pairs of 2. And that's essentially the game. It's pretty slick. It's very simple. The whole game, the setting, the character creation, the rules, the monsters, and the GM advice all comes to about 100 pages. I think this would be a really good game for a one-shot during Halloween. Maybe next year when I've got a little bit more of my sea legs back, if you will. I really enjoy horror role-playing games. It takes a really specific group of people to try and get that done. I think that horror is often the hardest game to pull off, not necessarily from a rules or a setting perspective, because those of us who enjoy horror are reading the games with that in mind. But getting it to the table, I think the biggest hurdle for horror games to overcome is the buy-in from the players. Playing a horror game requires even more buy-in than I think a typical game. Exactly, John Doom. You were paralleling here. When you run horror, how do you try to get buy-in from your players to feel the appropriate sense of dread? It's tough because it actually requires not just more investment, but more restraint from the players. One mistimed Monty Python joke or can just destroy the sense of dread that you're building towards. Again, I think talking with your players saying, hey, I really want this to run this as a horror game, and I'm gonna need you guys to be more on point to get buy-in. But the other thing is, I personally use 2 techniques. I think I've talked about these on Behind the Screen before. One is the unreliable narrator. When I'm running a horror game, I am not trying to present the world in a simulationist view of, hey, here is how it is, which I do in a fantasy game or in Savage Worlds game. I'm going to lie to you. I'm going to bend the truth. I'm going to present the same sort of optical trickery that we have in movies to build tension. The shadows that are falling that may just be the trees or a robe draped over something or a coat. I'm going to be a little bit more visceral in my descriptions. I typically turn the heat down when I'm running horror games, so it's a little bit colder. It just sets people on edge a little bit more. So that's one way. But the other way is really to just say, hey, it's not... How do I want to put this? John asked a good question. I'm trying to stay... There we go. Thanks, Padre, for bringing me back in here. You really want to have your descriptions still be short and succinct, but give atmosphere, like Rook said. In our Torg game, it was the description of the hopelessness in the casino that brought the dread to the table, as much as the description of the body horror that was going on there. Also, take a page out of Lovecraft. Don't describe things in as great detail. Gloss it over. For example, instead of an orc, a hulking monster, a hulking form that stands head and shoulders above you, with scars and marking on the skin, just howling in your face with thick-set brow and jaw and heavy teeth. That describes way more. That's going to bring more of a visceral reaction from your players than you see the orc standing screaming at you. So I had a great interview with John Goff last night. We were talking about Night Train. It's currently uploading very slowly, and Twitch was having some issues, so I can't just quickly upload it. So it'll be live on YouTube. But he was recommending the Last Voyage of the Demeter, which, if you are unfamiliar, is the ship that brings Dracula from Transylvania to England. And he said there's this great line in there when, the moment where the heroes realize one of the people has been traveling with the coffin. They're from Dracula's homeland. How do we defeat this thing? And John said the response from the actress is brilliant, because she says, this thing has been a blight on my people for centuries. Why would you think I know how to fight it? I'm like, that would be a moment in a game where you can just instantly chill your characters and your players. There is no way, right? There's no way to fight the alien, the xenomorph. It's survive it and find a way off the ship. Fast movements behind the character so they don't notice is a great one. Rook. John says, I see horror movies play with characters seeing something, but then their attention is drawn away. I did this in our Fading Suns horror game. Dripping noises being, and fluid that looks like blood spreading across the hallway is an oil leak. The person sitting at the console whose robes are fluttering is really just the air moving a coat left over a chair. The sensation of things crawling inside your spacesuit, nothing more than the atmosphere getting to you. Like, you can play with perceptions in a horror game, and I think there's a lot more leeway from players who want that buy-in. All right, so kind of jumping back to Myrrorside, a little digression into how to run a horror game, which is always, I think, a great thing to talk about. You damage your attributes. Physical damage, damaging your physical attributes. Magical damage, damaging your attunement. Social embarrassment or anxiety, represented by your social attribute going down. And essentially, it's how much did you exceed the target number by, plus a flat damage of your weapon, minus your target's armor. A system that I love, that's actually from a game that I've been developing for Strange Owl Games. Works the same way. Damage over the threshold, or whatever you roll over the threshold, converts to damage plus your character's weapon, flat damage, minus armor. I think it's a brilliantly simple system. Let's see here. There's this other thing that they add, this great mechanic called Pulse. And Pulse is the emotional dread tracker that's slowly ramping up. I would probably use something very physical to represent this. I love using my big escalation die. I have this big chunky photo cube that I've put in front of, numbers 1 through 6 when I'm using the escalation die in 13th Age. I would do something like this with the Pulse. And so Pulse is this representation of your character's heartbeat, how much dread is in the atmosphere. So when something weird happens, the pulse goes up by 1. If you enter the Myrrorside and realize you're no longer in the world you know, the pulse goes up. Encountering an irrational fear, encountering a primal fear, entering a location reputed to be haunted or a murder site, these things all increase the pulse. And as your pulse goes up, the tension level goes up. And much like the fear levels in Deadlands, the higher the the pulse and tension that goes up, the more penalties you have to be doing things. So normal is fine. You have unease, which increases your perception tests. Anxiety gives us social stress. Dread is even worse. You start suffering mental stress. And it just kind of ramps up to terror, where you have disadvantage on all checks because you're out of your mind, fleeing in panic. And I have to say, I love the art in this book. I showed off a couple of pieces. This kind of bluish black, silhouetted light. I really like for creating the atmosphere of this Myrrorside. And then there's another mechanic that they have in here called collateral. And collateral is sort of a brilliant mechanic. If you want, you don't ever have to fail a test. Whenever you roll an action test and the dice give you a fail, you can accept a collateral token to boost your total. Your action test changes from a failure to a 0, meaning you just barely succeed. And there are ways to get rid of collateral. Directors, which is the GM, can use collateral against you. Certain Myrrorside creatures bleed collateral off to trigger things. But at the end of the session, if you end the session with any collateral, you have to suffer what's called payback. You've pushed yourself too hard. You've had this stressful thing that you've overcome, and the toll is taken during your downtime. Whenever you have collateral at the end of a session, you have to spend it, and you take disadvantages. You can become accused of a serious crime. Turn to the bottle or something else to try and deal with the issues that you saw. You may slip into depression. You may create a whole new identity for yourself to kind of reconcile what you saw versus what you're living. You may become sleepless. You suffer these traumas for taking collateral, but in the moment, it helps your character to survive, and maybe you can bleed it off or get rid of it before the end of the session. If you can get players to buy into that sort of mechanic, it's a very temptation-driven reward cycle, which I love. There was this great game called Witch Hunter by Paradigm Press, where you had hero points, but you could also get what essentially were sin points, and it was very easy. Like, you could always cash in a sin point, and they worked better than hero points. They came back faster, but the more you used them, the more you were slipping towards falling into under control of the darkness. This is kind of the same thing. In the moment, who doesn't want to succeed on a crucial roll? Yes, you do dodge the claws. You do find the clue. You make the leap. You get away from the creature. But at what cost? I think it's a great mechanic because in the moment, your players are going to want their characters to engage with it. And then afterwards is when the butcher's bill is paid. So yeah, that is Myrrorside. One of the interesting things is the default for characters in this games are young adults. So late teens, early 20s. Sort of Buffy season 5 to 7. Or essentially all of Angel. There are alternate character rules where you could play as children, adult characters, or even old characters. You could do like a Bubba Hotep thing, although I think that would totally ruin all of the tension and dread we were just talking about wanting to build. But it's interesting to me that they put it at that age where most of our horror movie characters are at, because they're the ones who are going to be convinced of their own immortality and so inquisitive that they're willing to go out and risk and attempt to solve these mysteries as they come up. They also have a really neat mechanic here at the end. The last 10 pages are for a GM-less game, where if you've got a bunch of people with buy-in, you get influence tokens, and so you can, it's sort of a yes and, but you have to spend your tokens, and if you run out of your tokens, you're sort of at the whim of the rest of the table. Yes, a very typical horror trope, Rook. So I actually really enjoyed this game. I thought this was a great little role-playing game, horror role-playing game at, again, at we're in the right season for it. Let me pull this up here real quick. I want to see what pull up my. So again, Myrrorside is on DriveThruRPG, Parallel Publishing, and come on, DriveThru's new site keeps telling me, hey, it's this new site. Right now, it's only $9.75 to pick up. They do have a softcover and a hardcover available for purchase. I'll put those links in the show notes. I'm going to be off on Thursday. No behind the screen on Thursday. This is my second. Not last week was vacation. This week I'm going out to Gamehole Con in Madison. So if you're out there, come and say hi. I'm going to be demoing Doomguard on Demo Row Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And if you're going to go to the Peg Pizza Party, I'll see you there. Hopefully I'll see you there, John. But when we get back, I'm going to review another horror supplement. But this time for Savage Worlds, I got the chance to read through Dead End by Atomic Ninja Studios. And by God, that is a great zombie supplement. I need to see if they have a physical copy of that and have that on my shelf. So we're going to cover Dead End and Zombies next Tuesday, and then we're going to look at Shadows of Estrin for, I think, the rest of October. But that's it. I got the chance to hang out with a bunch of good friends who we've been doing this annual convention. We call it Total Party Con, TPK. We got to hang out. We hang out for about 3 days, and we play role-playing games. And this is our 8th year doing it. So there were 8 people around my table, and with me 9. It's the 2nd year of playing AD&D 2nd edition, and we're going to probably wrap it up next year with the 3rd year of D&D. Great times. A number of PCs died. New hirelings coming in. The big bad evil guy had the final stroke because they misunderstood her threat. Thought there was army coming in, and instead she coated the group's home base in ice and froze all of the people solid. Just a wonderful time. Thanks to all of those guys for coming out. I'll probably do a more in-depth after-action report in November. This Thursday, Chris Landauer is going to take over Savage Universe for me, so don't worry, there will be Savage Universe this week. And yeah, so when I get the episode up, I'll let everybody know on the Discord channel. If you're not a member of the Iconic Patronage, we have a Discord channel where you can just come and hang out with all of us. There have been ton of great people. Rook's always posting things. Tink's always posting things. Doom is always posting things. Dream Shaper has been posting his pictures of all of these Marvel figures that he's painting for the Simon miniature board game. So it's a good time, but I'll post the link there on the Discord. If you want to become a member of the Iconic Patronage, head over to patreon.com/Iconic Production. We're in the process of revamping it. Come January, there's going to be a whole new set of rewards and interactions and tiers. But for right now, if you want to support us, jump over there and you're able to get access to our Discord. To those of you who are watching this and also follow the Iconic Podcast, I'm going to be making a statement, just an update. I've got a little recap, and we sat down to play in September, and we had thunderstorms here in Dallas, and so we got maybe 15 or 20 minutes of usable recording before everything just power kept going out on us, so we had to call it. We're going to be back in the studio recording I think next Sunday, not this Sunday, but next Sunday. So there will be more Iconic podcasts coming out. We just had a lot of technical issues in September. You do live here, Rook, and cheers to you, buddy. So Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you all in a week. Until then, have a good one.